This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin. President Donald Trump is threatening to shut down the southern border to stop thousands of Central American migrants from illegally entering the country. A caravan of Honduran refugees are reportedly making their way to the U.S. right now, which could lead to a potential showdown between migrants and security forces. Organizers of the caravan say they are waiting for thousands more to join them before they attempt to cross the Mexican border. Meanwhile, President Trump told supporters in Montana that he's considering taking military action against the caravan.
I'm willing to send the military to defend our southern border if necessary because of the illegal immigration onslaught.
And here with more on that is senior international correspondent Gary Lane. Gary, do you think there's going to be a showdown on the southern border between this migrant caravan and the U.S. military?
Well, a showdown if it's necessary. Trump says he'll send the military down there to protect the border and then shut the border down because he's had it with illegal immigrants coming across into the United States. He wants Mexico and, of course, El Salvador, Guatemala to do something about it. Honduras as well.
Well, what are these other countries doing, if anything?
Yeah. Well, what Mexico is doing, Mexico has asked the High Commissioner for Refugees of the United Nations to set up some camps on the southern border. That would be the Mexican border in Chiapas along Guatemala, and set up camps to intercept these refugees as they come, to identify if they are true refugees and if they need to be moved farther north. But in addition to that, Mark, they're also asking that their federal police and their military go down to the southern border with Guatemala.
Immigration is a big issue right now, Gary.
Yeah.
Do you feel like President Trump's rhetoric is going to affect the midterms at all?
Oh, definitely. And I think that's a reason why President Trump is doing this. He wants to play to his base. He wants them to get excited. Of course, he feels strongly about this, but with an election less than 3 weeks away, he wants them to come out and vote, Mark. So he's playing to his base.
President Trump has talked about building a wall on the border with Mexico. Do you think, in light of everything that's going on, including this caravan, that his supporters are going to put more pressure on him to fulfill that campaign promise?
Well, I don't know if they need to put more pressure on him because President Trump wants the wall. They don't need to put pressure on him. He wants it. He's fighting Congress to get the money, and he's going to press forward one way or another, Mark.
Is this caravan a ploy of the left? Are they behind this, organizing this?
Of course they are. And the left wants to see that they want to try to make the president look bad and his supporters look bad in this. Oh, you have no compassion. Vote for us because we're the Democrats who have compassion. So I think they're somewhat involved in this.
Okay, Gary Lane, thanks so much.
Certainly.
All right. Protesters are demonstrating outside Saudi Arabia's embassy in Washington, D.C. over the disappearance and suspected murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Turkish officials now suggest his body may have been removed from the Saudi consulate and taken to another city. And there are still questions about audio evidence the Turks claim to have of the incident. Jennifer Wishon is in Washington with more.
Despite earlier reports that Turkish officials played an audio recording of Khashoggi's murder for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, both Turkey's foreign minister and Pompeo say that didn't happen. One important shift, though, the president now all but confirms Jamal Khashoggi is dead.
It certainly looks that way to me. It's very sad.
He promises very severe consequences if the Saudis are found to have murdered Khashoggi. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin has already pulled out of a major Saudi investment conference. 17 days ago, the Washington Post reporter entered the consulate and hasn't been seen. Turkey released video of a so-called Saudi hit squad entering the country shortly before Khashoggi's appointment, and they claim to have an audio recording confirming Khashoggi was tortured, killed, and dismembered. This week, Secretary Pompeo met with both Saudi and Turkish leaders. Both countries are conducting investigations.
We do believe that between these two efforts, a complete picture will emerge for what actually transpired here.
Some members of that team are linked to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's been credited with making positive changes in the kingdom, but also of increasing authoritarian rule and cracking down on dissidents.
With such an unprecedented transfer of power in the works in Saudi Arabia, my understanding is that Saudi authorities are hard-pressed to find a way of saving face in this situation.
For Washington, it's a delicate balancing act. Appearing on Faith Nation, CBN News chief political analyst David Brody says the president will approach his response with leverage in mind.
They have this arms deal. We know about that. All right. So that's a major relationship right there. Beyond that, there's one word called oil. They control the oil production as it relates to OPEC. They're basically the de facto leading member of OPEC. And so you put all that together, and in Trump's mind, he's thinking, wait a minute, I got to go careful on this because I have relationships.
President Trump warns against rushing to judgment, but says he wants to know what happened and where the fault lies. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
3 U.S. nationals were wounded Thursday in a shooting at the residence of the governor of Afghanistan's Kandahar province. The top U.S. commander in the country, General Austin Scott Miller, was attending an event and nearly escaped with his life. CBN's national security correspondent Eric Rosales joins us live with more. Eric.
Well, Mark, I got to tell you, as we need to know, parliamentary elections in Afghanistan are only about 4 days away, and Taliban and ISIS fighters in that area are going to do all they can to disrupt this vote. You know, Taliban militants are already calling and they're claiming responsibility for this attack after the high-level meeting took place over at the governor's compound. Now, it was a very, very close call for the top U.S. commander in the country, General Austin Scott Miller. He was attending the event. He was not injured, but officials say that he was actually standing just near the attacker. Sadly, one of the U.S. military's most valuable allies in the region was killed by his own bodyguard. The police chief in the area, Abdul Razik, was killed along with 2 other Afghan officials. Now, a spokesperson for the U.S.-led mission in Afghanistan told CBN News by phone that, quote, initial reports indicate that it was an Afghan-on-Afghan incident. The Taliban claimed that it was an inside attacker. In a statement, the Taliban referred to Razik as a brutal police chief. Now, the attack was eventually, the attacker, that is, was eventually shot and killed in the shootout. But this assassination was a huge, significant victory for the Taliban and a major blow for the Afghan and the U.S. campaign. Now, this is just the latest attack that has taken place before the elections.
Eric, how many other attacks have taken place?
Well, you know, there's been at least 10 attacks. 10 candidates have actually been attacked and killed across the country there. And there's also been attacks on voter registration centers, including one just last April that killed at least 60 people in that area.
Does this attack change anything for the U.S. military?
Well, you know what I did? I actually asked that exact same question to Pentagon officials, and they said, Secretary Mattis actually said it best. He says that this attack will not affect U.S. military movement in the country. As a matter of fact, the military is kind of using this attack to kind of gain momentum. You know, General Scott Miller actually tweeted out that not only did he lose a great friend, but Afghanistan and its people lost a great friend, and he was a true patriot, and the Afghan people will continue to fight this terrorist organization, and they're using this as kind of a stepping stone for something much bigger to get rid of ISIS and the Taliban in that area.
All right, Eric Rosales, thanks so much for that report.
You got it, Mark.
Coming up, we're going to break down what an invitation to the Pope could mean for Christians living in North Korea. Welcome back. Pope Francis is considering a trip to North Korea. South Korean President Moon Jae-in visited the pontiff at the Vatican Thursday. He conveyed North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's desire for a papal visit to North Korea. Kim is expected to extend an official invitation soon. Christianity is outlawed in North Korea, and believers face prison and even death for practicing their faith. Open Doors CEO David Curry says Pope Francis should accept that invitation, and he joins us now. David, why should the Pope go to North Korea?
Well, it's been 18 years since North Korea has made any overture to a Christian leader of this kind. I just think it's the right opportunity. I'm encouraging Pope Francis to go and to go boldly. North Korea is #1 on our world watch list, which makes it the most difficult place to practice your faith. There's no freedom there. There are many, many Christians who are in labor camps. So the situation is dire, But I think the opportunity is big to make a statement and to have a sit-down conversation about the real issues regarding religious freedom for Christians and for others in the country.
You see this as a moment in history. Do you think, or actually, do you see God's hand at work?
I know God is at work in the midst of even the most difficult situations in North Korea. I was meeting last week in South Korea with defectors. There are lots of Jesus people in North Korea. It's just exceptionally difficult. I think this could be a pivot moment. We've yet to see it. I think you go in cautiously. You don't go in naive and thinking that somehow this is a good actor. I think we understand he's been a tyrant, and there are many atrocities that have happened within North Korea. That being said, it is an opportunity. I don't think we can afford to wait another generation, another 18 years for North Korea to reach out to a Christian leader. We just have so many people, 60,000 Christians in labor camps right now. We need to get some insight into what we can do. We've made a few suggestions, talking with Kim Jong-un about maybe bringing some experts in on religious liberty. How do you transition to a more open society for people within that context? There's lots of things that we can begin if we can have the Pope sit down and talk about these real issues. And he's been forthright about his concern about Christian persecution on the Korean Peninsula.
Well, David, like you talked about this a little bit more, or talked about it earlier in an interview, but break it down some more for us. Could this invitation possibly signal an openness to easing up on the persecution of Christians overall in North Korea?
I think it very well could signal that. I'm sure that Kim Jong-un has looked at the perspective of what would it mean to bring in the most public Christian leader, the head of the Catholic Church, into his country. What signals does that send to the world? I'm sure he's also looking at it from a political advantage, but it's an opportunity for a Christian leader to go and sit down face to face and talk about what it would mean to have religious freedom, and to really highlight the fact that Christians are good citizens within every community in which they work. That was been proven true in China, and in the past few years we've seen that open up again. Now there's increasing pressure on Christians in China. But I think it's an opportunity to talk about these things in a forthright way. And that's why I'm encouraging the Pope to accept the invitation and to go with boldness and talk about Christian persecution in North Korea.
All right, David Curry with Open Doors. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you.
Turning now to health news, an estimated 40% of adults will be diagnosed with some form of cancer during their lifetime. The physical and emotional trials can take a tremendous toll, and your spiritual life can also suffer. Lori Johnson introduces us to a woman who is dedicated to helping people as they deal with cancer.
All hospital chaplains have a demanding job, but imagine if every patient in the hospital had been diagnosed with cancer. That's a reality for LaWanda Long, who tries to meet this deep spiritual need.
The pain and the sickness and the suffering that you go through can weaken your faith sometimes.
As chaplain of Atlanta's Cancer Treatment Centers of America, she walks from room to room, prepared to deal with almost anything.
If they're angry at God and they lash out at me, I take that because I know it's not me personally, but I mean, when to make us grow closer to God, sometimes we have to vent. We have to say, I'm upset, I'm angry. That's what David did in some of his lament psalms.
Her mission? Help patients know the peace of Christ and his presence in the storm.
God will walk you through, and we'll be with you in good times and in bad times. And the Lord doesn't promise that bad things won't happen, but that he will always be present. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cry, but I've never felt God's presence anymore.
Chaplain Long helps people who know God grow closer to him. For others, she makes the introduction.
When she said God loves me, nobody had ever told me that. For me to hear that and replay that in my mind over and over and over and over and over again, then I felt like, regardless of what happened to me, I was going to be okay.
Years ago, a patient told the chaplain she received better spiritual care here than at her home church, which made the chaplain realize churches need to learn how to minister specifically to cancer patients. So Cancer Treatment Centers of America began Our Journey of Hope. Church leaders attend a 2-day seminar learning how to specifically minister to cancer patients.
The great thing about this training is it is totally free for churches, and then they go back and train others to become cancer care ministers.
Among the lessons, when talking to a cancer patient, don't discount their grief.
I hear a lot of patients tell me that they don't like when people tell them, oh, it's just hair. A lot of times when people begin to lose body parts, whether it's hair, or whether it's their bladder, or whether it's their breast or a kidney, they do grieve that. So I think we have to make sure we hear their hearts.
Avoid telling people how to feel or think.
Because when people are told that, they feel minimized as if they don't matter.
Have compassion, not sympathy.
But you say, listen, I'm with you, and we're going to get through this together, and whatever you need, I'm here for you. That's very different than saying, I'm so sorry for you.
Don't cast doubt on their treatment plan.
Sometimes I meet people who have great faith, but they begin to lose hope.
And don't tell a cancer patient about someone who died of the disease.
Particularly people of faith, we got to make sure we don't spread negative messages.
So while medical professionals do what they can to treat physical needs, others help these cancer patients focus on God as they walk through it.
Bless every doctor and nurse you assigned to care for Mr. Hasty. Give them wisdom and knowledge, Father God. Anoint them with your grace.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Coming up, stories about tests of faith in 2 different ways are trending online this week. We'll tell you more when Newswatch continues. A fire chief's faith and a pastor's homeless experiment are 2 hot topics this week and are trending online. Here's CBN's Jessica Chaco and FaithWire's Dan Andrews.
Megachurch pastor James McDonald surprised his congregation when he disguised himself as a homeless man sitting outside his own church on a Sunday morning. Dan, I imagine McDonald received various reactions from people passing by.
Yeah, I've seen pastors do this before, and so the results have been mixed. Some have done it to kind of, wake up their congregants to how they're treating other people. And so when you start to watch this video, you start to get that nervous feeling like, oh no, they're going to ignore him the whole time. But a few people do walk by and they kind of curiously look. But then as the video goes on, you really start to see some wonderful interactions, even with kids that were, urging their parents to help him, and they were praying for him. They were giving him water. They were asking him to come in, and it was really great to see. So one of these videos that can be kind of cringeworthy and really convicting kind of ended up on a high note.
What a creative way to get your own congregation involved, and what a great response for them. McDonald posted the undercover footage of his congregation's reaction on Facebook. That video has been viewed just under 1 million times. Well, up next, a former Atlanta fire chief wins a settlement in court after he was fired for writing a book about his Christian faith. Kelvin Cochran is a decorated firefighter who served Atlanta's fire department for over 30 years. Dan, what details can you give us about this story?
Yeah, so basically what happened was the book came out, and then there were quote unquote controversial pieces in the book where he, from a Christian perspective, addressed issues of homosexuality and things like that. And so the mayor at the time reacted, and then he was fired. But they cited, they tried to backtrack and cite and say that, well, we weren't firing him because of his Christian views, but because he didn't follow proper protocol. He didn't get permission from the town first. And so while technically maybe that rule was there, the judge didn't see it that way. They saw it as an infringement on free speech. And really, it just seems like one of those rules that could easily be sort of overlooked, especially when the book shouldn't really have been considered controversial at all. The only reason you would go after and use this rule is if you found this book to be problematic. So the judge didn't buy that complaint, and he ended up winning a huge settlement because of it.
Well, after the settlement, Cochran stated, "Given my history and work throughout my career and with the city of Atlanta, I was shocked that writing a book and encouraging Christian men to be the husbands and fathers and men that God has called us to be would jeopardize my 34-year career." You can watch CBN News' Skype interview with Cochran at cbnnews.com. Back to you.
Right. Thank you, Jessica. Definitely an interview you want to check out. We'll be right back with more of CBN Newswatch. Don't go away. Several newer Christian music artists picked up the top prizes at the 2018 Gospel Music Association's Dove Awards. Corey Asbury is one of those artists. He wrote the song Reckless Love, which captured the hearts of Christians across the country all year long. It expresses the unstoppable love of God in a profound new way and won 2 big awards. Reckless Love was picked not only for the Worship Song of the Year, but also for the overall Song of the Year. Other big winners included Zach Williams, who won Artist of the Year, and Torrin Wells, who won New Artist of the Year. And you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care about most at cbnnews.com. Have a great day.